The morning the numbers were announced, I was sitting alone at the worn-out kitchen table, sipping a cup of lukewarm tea. My house wasn't much, a creaking two-bedroom home with paint that had long since faded, and a roof that always threatened to leak whenever the monsoon came. For years I had lived frugally, stretching every penny of my late husband's pension, making do with hand-me-down clothes and second-hand appliances. Life wasn't luxurious, but it was steady, and in that quiet steadiness I had found a strange kind of comfort. That morning, however, comfort gave way to disbelief. The lottery ticket I had bought out of habit. A ritual I never expected to yield anything matched the winning numbers one after another. I held the small slip of paper in my shaking hands, reading and rereading, my heart pounding louder than the ticking clock on the wall. 3 million, 5 million, 10 million, the jackpot was mine. For the first time in years, tears streamed down my face, not from grief or exhaustion, but from joy. I thought of everything I could finally do: repair the house, donate to the children's hospital where I once worked part-time, maybe even take that train trip across the countryside I'd always dreamed of. The money wasn't just wealth. It was freedom, security, and hope all rolled into one. When I called my son to share the news, his voice carried excitement, but underneath it, there was something else I couldn't quite name at the time. "Mom, that's incredible," David exclaimed. His wife, Julia, could be heard in the background squealing with delight. "This changes everything. Don't worry about a thing now. We'll help you manage it." I smiled, though I didn't fully understand his words. Why would I need help? I was perfectly capable of hiring a financial advisor if it came to that. Still, I brushed the thought aside. David was my only child, the one I had raised with sleepless nights and endless sacrifices. Surely, he was only looking out for me. When they arrived later that evening, the mood was celebratory. Julia brought a bottle of expensive wine, insisting that we toast to our new life. I noticed the way she said "our," but I ignored it. She had always been ambitious, always yearning for the finer things in life. At dinner, they started talking about possibilities: buying a new house, investing in businesses, traveling the world. I listened, smiling politely, though my mind was still overwhelmed by the reality of my win. When I mentioned donating part of the money to charity, Julia's smile faltered for the briefest moment before she recovered. "That's sweet of you, Mom," she said with a tone that felt rehearsed. "But you have to think about the family first. You don't want strangers benefiting more than your own blood, right?" Her words pricked at me, but I swallowed my discomfort. Surely it was just excitement talking. Surely they were happy for me. That night after they left, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. The old fan hummed above me, but my mind was too restless to settle. I thought about how money could change people. I had seen it before. Neighbors who fought over inheritance, siblings who turned against each other for a piece of land. I prayed silently that my son would never fall into that trap, but deep down, a whisper of doubt lingered. The next few weeks only confirmed my unease. David and Julia started visiting more often, always with suggestions. They wanted me to move into a bigger house closer to them, of course. They hinted that I should put the money in a joint account for convenience. They even suggested I sign over some properties in advance, just in case anything happened to me. At first, I brushed it off as eagerness, even laughed it away. But every time I said no, their smiles grew tighter, their voices a little sharper. I wanted to believe their love for me was stronger than greed. I wanted to believe that family bonds could not be broken by money. But as I looked at the lottery ticket framed on my wall, I wondered if it was a blessing or the beginning of a nightmare I never asked for. And in the shadows of my heart, I began to fear that winning might have cost me the one thing I treasured most, my son. The first cracks began to show in subtle ways. David no longer greeted me with the warmth he once had. Where there used to be hugs and laughter, now there were hurried conversations about plans and opportunities. Julia's visits became routine, her eyes always scanning my house, calculating, as if she were already measuring curtains for a mansion that wasn't hers yet. One afternoon, Julia arrived unannounced, carrying glossy brochures of luxury villas. She spread them out on my kitchen table with the confidence of someone closing a deal. "Look at this one, Mom," she said, tapping her manicured finger on a page showing a sprawling estate with marble floors and an infinity pool. "You deserve better than this old place, and imagine how much easier it would be for all of us if you lived closer to us. We could take care of you, you know." Her tone was smooth, but her eyes betrayed something sharper. I smiled faintly, shaking my head. "Julia, this house is my home. Your father and I built our lives here. I'm not leaving it behind for marble floors." Her lips tightened, though she tried to hide it. "Of course, it's your decision, but don't you think David deserves to live in comfort, too? After all, he's your son. If you don't do it for yourself, do it for him." Her words stung more than I wanted to admit. Had all my sacrifices over the years not been enough? Raising David alone after his father died, working 2 jobs to pay for his education, was that not comfort I had already given him? A week later, David confronted me directly. "Mom," he began, his voice firmer than I had ever heard it, "we need to talk about the money." I looked up from the photo album I had been sorting. "What about it? You can't just keep it all to yourself. That's selfish. Julia and I have dreams too. We want to invest, start businesses, maybe even have kids. You don't need all that money." I closed the album slowly, meeting his eyes. "David, I want it. I never said I wouldn't share, but it's not for anyone to demand from me, and certainly not to the point of guilt." His jaw clenched. "We're not demanding, we're asking, but if you're going to be stubborn, maybe we'll have to take other measures." My heart froze. "Other measures? What do you mean by that?" He avoided my gaze, but his words carried weight. "You wouldn't want the whole town thinking you're some greedy old woman who abandoned her family, would you? Imagine what people would say if they knew you refused to help your own son." It was the first time my son had ever spoken to me with something close to menace, and it broke something inside me. From then on, their visits carried an edge. Julia would make comments about how accidents happen when people are careless with money. David would remind me almost daily that I was getting older, and that things could go wrong if I didn't secure the family's future soon. One evening, I overheard them whispering in my living room while they thought I was asleep. "She's too stubborn," Julia hissed. "We need to push harder. What's she going to do with millions? Sit on it until she dies. We should have control now." David's voice was lower, but equally cold. "She'll give in. If she doesn't, we'll make her. We have ways." I pressed a trembling hand to my mouth to keep from gasping. My son, my only son, the boy I had carried, nursed, and sacrificed for, was now plotting against me for money I had never intended to hoard. I cried quietly that night, clutching the framed photo of his childhood, his gap-toothed smile at 7, his proud face at graduation. Where had that boy gone? Yet beneath my tears something else stirred, a quiet strength, a determination I hadn't felt in years. If they thought they could bully me into submission, they were wrong. I would not give them my money. But more than that, I would make sure the world saw the truth about who they had become. And for that, I would need patience and a plan. The idea came to me not as a thunderbolt, but like a small, steady flame, quiet at first, then warming everything around it until the darkness retreated. If David and Julia wanted to turn private greed into public spectacle, then I would make the spectacle reveal them. But I would do it within the law, with calm dignity, and with the whole world watching. First, I sought counsel. I called my old friend Anissa, who ran a small legal clinic and had helped me with paperwork years ago. She listened without interruption, as I told her everything, the desperation in my voice stripped bare, without melodrama, just facts. When I finished, she was silent for a long time. "You're not the first parent to be betrayed by their children," she said finally. "But you're wise to want this done cleanly. If your son and daughter-in-law have threatened you, we document it. If they're manipulating you, we record their words where legal, bring witnesses. And most importantly, we control the narrative." We made a list. Lawyers to retain for protective orders and to draft unambiguous instructions for the bank. A trusted financial advisor who would freeze any attempts to transfer funds without the proper signatures and medical clearances. And a journalist, I insisted, someone who cared about truth and would listen to the facts without sensationalism. I called Miriam, the local reporter whose voice I'd heard on the radio for years. Miriam had done a series on elder abuse once. I had worked behind the scenes to help a neighbor in that story. When I told her I had something she needed to hear, she agreed to meet on the record. But even with lawyers and reporters on my side, I knew the stage I set had to tempt them. David and Julia were reckless now. Their greed made them careless. They wanted public validation, assurances that their plan would work. A live TV interview about my lottery win would be the perfect bait. An invitation to boast, to pressure, to reveal themselves in front of a camera. They would think the spotlight belonged to them to claim. I planned to give it to them and to take it away. I pretended to soften. I began to play the role of the compromised matriarch, slightly shaken, more willing to listen. I started making conversational mistakes in front of them. Maybe I should sign this. I'd say, holding a blank check, which I never signed. Maybe it's safer to keep the account joint. Their eyes would light up whenever I showed the slightest uncertainty. I let them see it. I wanted them to believe their pressure was working. Meanwhile, Anissa and I worked fast. She called in favors at the bank to set up safeguards, dual authentication for transfers, mandatory waiting periods, and the legal authority to deny any transfer where duress was suspected. She drafted a short affidavit, it describing the threats I'd received, the whispered sentences I'd overheard, the veiled comments meant to frighten me into compliance. We recorded everything I could legally record, phone calls where they tried to guilt me, voice messages with veiled threats. Everywhere possible, we converted suspicion into evidence. Miriam promised to run a feature, framed as a human, interest piece about an unlikely lottery winner, and the adjustments fame and fortune bring. The plan was simple, a well-produced pre-interview segment to air the following weekend on a morning program. Miriam would